Hello, everybody. Welcome to CafeRainyDays. My usual humble request that before we begin to introduce my guest today, I'd like everybody to please subscribe to the channel. Our guest today, without further ado, is Sam Millichap. I've only recently met Sam, so I don't really know much about her, and I was really scratching my head as to, how do I introduce Sam? So Sam does a lot of blogging with her son when she went out touring with her son, but then she's also done some blogs on a site called Medium. And so I thought I'll read you her introduction. I suppose it's in your own words, is it, Sam?
Yes.
Yeah, let me read that and you'll get the idea as to why we are doing this. Sam has been working off and on for technology companies all her working life. She's also done teaching and teaching for adults and children out of the mainstream settings. In her middle age, she has finally broken free from the prison of her comfort zone and jumped headlong into the challenge zone, accepting random calls for help across the globe. And that's the introduction, that this is why we are doing this. So Sam will straight away begin by define or just talk about what this comfort zone as against challenge zone is.
Firstly, thank you for the invitation on your lovely channel. And yes, we've only just met, so thank you. It's great also to meet you. This part of my life, so now I'm 47 now, and I have this huge opportunity to do something new. I've been a single parent since my son was 5. And that has naturally tied me to one spot for most of his childhood. But he recently left home, and we've always talked about what I would do when he left home. So he's been a huge part of my decision to do what I'm doing. Now he's left home, I can do exactly as I want. So I'm rewriting my life. And like you said, I am accepting random calls of help around the world. So wherever there's an interesting project, wherever that might be, I am just setting off with a backpack and living my life on a project basis, rather than having any long-term goals.
So just for the audience's sake, so it's not as simple as Sam is making out to be. She made this decision. She sold her house, left her job, and then she's just taken the plunge. For any normal individual, just getting up, selling the house, and just setting off is quite scary. And I remember when I was saying to you, and I wouldn't be able to do that, and you said, when the focus shifts from earning money, then you can do anything. So elaborate on that. So your focus is not money.
To be honest, I don't think I've never been focused on money. When I graduated, I earned a huge amount of money, more money than I've earned since. Lots of people in interviews have commented on saying, when I've got a new job, wow, your salary was so high and now it's so low. Money didn't mean anything to me. Okay, it provided me with a home. It enabled me to buy my parents a home, but it's not something that drives me. It's not something that makes me want to get out of bed in the morning. I never looked at my paycheck and thought, wow, I can do this with it. I'm not bothered by my make of car. I mean, I didn't have a car for the first 20 years of my life. I was still using buses, predominantly because I worked in cities. I didn't understand why you needed anything more than 4 wheels and a steering wheel. And the same with a house. I think the location's important because you want to be in a safe place, but the size of a house and having a spare room, it just wasn't a priority. Money's never been important to me. And I think that's from my family background. We didn't have any money as children. And it was never a barrier to anything. It wasn't a barrier to accessing university. It wasn't, there were libraries then, a lot more libraries than there are now. So I had access to books when they needed them. There was nothing we couldn't do because we were poor. That was how we were raised. Everything was possible.
And money can't buy happiness. So
money definitely doesn't buy happiness. No. And
just to sort of name a few, as I was reading through your blogs, I mean, some of the things that you've done, end of life care, you helped somebody with end of life care for her partner, is it? And then sea snail harvesting. I mean, I didn't even know these things happen and exist. Where do you find these projects? So first of all, where do you find them? Second of all, what are you looking for in a project? Examples as well along the way, you know, as to what sort of projects you've done.
Okay, so I sold my house and quit my job in September. So I was on the road on September the 4th. And with Brexit, it has changed travel enormously. Okay, if you've got it, I've only got a British passport. So I had initially, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, my plan was just to set off, travel around Europe, maybe then go into Asia and just carry on. Brexit now, that's not possible. You have 3 months in a Schengen zone area. So that could be Germany, France, and Portugal. And then you have to get out for 90 days. You cannot stay in that area for another 90 days. And that's on a rolling 180-day basis. So this causes huge problems for the long-term traveler, which is how I see myself. So when I choose a project, I have to consider which country that's in. And if it's in Germany, for instance, and then I know that I'm going to have to get out of Schengen, so that there's only a few countries I can go to: Croatia, Bulgaria, Turkey, Morocco. So it's kind of hopping in, hopping out.
Yeah, because you have to come back to the UK.
You have to get out of Schengen. You don't have to come to the UK.
Oh, I see. Right.
You just have to get out of Schengen. You can only go back in after another 90 days. So it's 180 rolling period. You don't have to do 90 days, but what I've found is that projects are best when it's 30 days or more, because that gives you an opportunity to really immerse yourself in the culture, feel comfortable, and like it's a second home. Any less than 30 days,
then it's just a holiday.
Yeah. So I tend to do 90 days because that's the duration of the visa. There might be several projects within those 90 days. So I might be in North Germany for 1 month, South Germany for another, and then do a little bit of traveling in between on my own. So finding projects is unfortunately now a lot about visas. And that was a complete change of plan. That I hadn't anticipated that. And for me as a traveler, Brexit's been, it's awful. As to your question of where I find these projects, there's a program called Workaway. And for a very small fee every year, I think about £35, you can become a member of Workaway, either as a workawayer or a host. So I'm a workawayer, and the families I stay with are hosts. And the hosts are looking for some support. It could be working on their farm, it could be childcare, it could be, as you say, looking after a partner, somebody with end of life care. It could be a whole range of projects, but that family or that organization is looking for some support. They don't provide pay. There's no money exchanged whatsoever. So I'm not earning anything whilst I'm doing this, but I do get my board and I get my lodging. So my day-to-day spend is very, very minimal. How do I look for projects? I don't know about you, but I have about 50. When you set out on a career, I didn't know what to settle on. I had so many ideas in my head, but unfortunately this world kind of dictates that you have to follow one path, and you can make these small diversions, but ultimately you can't go from being a banker to, I don't know, being a shopkeeper. But in my head and on paper, I have about 50 jobs I'd love to try. I'd love to be a florist for a while. I'd love to be an environmentalist. I'd love to work with old people. There are so many things I'd like to try, and that's just not possible in a traditional career route.
Yeah.
But this project-based work, that allows me to dip into lots of different ideas. It's really fulfilling because it's creative. I get to learn so many different skills. I get to learn more about myself and my strengths and my weaknesses. Well, I get to experience so many different lifestyles, so many different choices that other people have made, but I to see them all. I get to experience as many as I like.
You sold your house, is it in September, and you were on the road on the 4th of September. So what was the very first thing that you did?
Well, I remember I had the sale sign still up on my house because it actually took, it got sold, you know, somebody put in an offer in May, but it actually didn't conclude until 2 months down the line in November, almost December. And so the sales sign was still up on the house. And I remember the house was empty, but I had, you know, the normal sofa on the drive ready to be collected, or, you know, and I remember just having my bag and I was waiting for a taxi, which was very special for me because usually I make my own way. I always want to start my journey by foot under my own steam. So it was unusual already because I was waiting for a taxi to take me to the airport. I can't exactly remember why. I think it was just the timing of it all. I had so much to do with cleaning the house on my own. So I think I just made it easier for myself. And I just remember being on the driveway thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? I've just left a perfectly reasonable job. I've left my son, who I've raised on my own. This crazy idea that it was unbelievable for about, until I got in that cab and I sat down and I did almost start crying. But the cab driver, he was like, where are you going? Obviously, naturally.
Yes.
And within 5 minutes, he'd said something like, we spent some time I was heading to Spain. So we spent some time in Spain. And just suddenly I realized why I was going. It was like, this is who I want to connect with. I don't want to stay here in this. It was my bricks and mortar prison. That's how I felt. A house is very limiting. When you have to come back every night to sleep in the same bed, it's very limiting. And that was when I was so desperate to break away from. So being in that cab with that guy talking to me about his time in Spain is exactly what I needed. So within about half an hour, I was fine. And I was like, yep, I've made the right decision. This is my future. Yeah.
And so you were obviously looking for projects, and the first project was Spain. So what did you do in Spain?
So in Spain, I didn't step out of my comfort zone too much. It was a slow transition. I went to teach English. Right. And that's a job I had done prior. I had been a teacher. Prior to that, I was teaching English as a second language. So I went to stay with a family. And the idea was that although he attended an international school, his parents didn't speak English and he was really struggling. So the idea was that after school, I'd kick around the football with him, but every interaction would be in English. It was a way for him to feel that school wasn't just about speaking English and home was about speaking Spanish. There could be an overlap. And that was all the family wanted me to do. They wanted me to spend 4 or 5 hours every evening, every afternoon, every evening, just speaking and playing with him in English.
And that lasted for how long? And then
actually, that one didn't go very well.
Oh, I see. Okay, so the very first project didn't go very well. Oh dear.
No, it didn't go well. And I learned some very valuable things from that.
Right.
I hadn't interviewed the family that I was going to stay with. And that is what now I always do. So I will always do a WhatsApp meeting with the family I'm going to stay with now.
Right. And what are the things that you're looking out for when you're doing this interview?
I'm making sure that the profile that I've seen on the workaway site is actually the people that I'm going to meet, reviewing what their expectations are. So making sure that they only expected me to teach English, making sure that they would give me food, making sure that there would be somewhere safe to stay. Just that. But I didn't do that on the first one. And there were problems. So I only lasted about 3.5 weeks.
Wow, there's lessons already. So when you realize that, okay, this is not the thing for me, do you have internet connection and can you then start looking for another project, or how does that work?
Yeah, so after 2 weeks, I start looking for my next project because it's very difficult to stack them all up because you don't know where you're going to be, and I want the flexibility. So after 2 weeks, I'd already started to make contact with other families. I had some people in mind, and that time we spoke on WhatsApp and just talked things through. Yes. And fortunately, when things went wrong with the first family, I was able to call the next family and say, I wonder if I could come a bit early. As an older workawayer, I'm a bit braver when things aren't going wrong, I will just leave. And also because I have some money behind me, I have that option, and I could move into a hostel, or I could move into a hotel. There are problems when people feel that they can't do that, and then they're obliged to stay. Everyone wants things to get better, but sometimes you have to face the reality that it's not going to get better. And then you have to have the bravery and the resources to move on.
Okay. And tell us about this, like I said, sea snail harvesting.
So this was just it was part of my time in Turkey. And some of these projects I organized through Workaway, others are just word of mouth. So I'll just get to hear about a family that just maybe want to harvest their walnuts because, whatever it is. And they'll say, oh, I've just had this message come through. We need to clear 7 walnut trees. Is anyone available now? And then I'll move to a new location. And that was the case with this snail foraging. Somebody did a good turn. And then I heard that they really like to eat snails.
Oh,
yeah. Then I found myself on this remote peninsula in Turkey collecting snails in a bag. I mean, it was just a one-off. You couldn't do it continuously, obviously, because of the impact on the environment and the snail population. Yeah, it's those kind of opportunities where if I was in my regular house doing my regular job, I'd leave to start class at 9. I'd come back at 5. There wouldn't even be the opportunity just to say, okay, I'll just do that for the day. Yeah. And that's what this new way of living enables me to do.
So what would you say, few of your favorite projects have been?
My project with the end of life care for the man with advanced Alzheimer's, when I set that up, the situation wasn't that. He wasn't end of life. It was just that him and his wife needed support. And they needed somebody to stay in the house while she went to do the shopping. Maybe she'd like to go and spend some time with friends. So she needed a couple of people just to be around for the guy. But when I turned up, the situation had deteriorated extremely fast. He was largely bedridden, immobile. Everyone was very worried that he was going to pass away very quickly. So things like that, those kind of moments, you have to think, can I do this? Like I hadn't cared for anyone. Suddenly I'm thrown in at the deep end with a family who are just coming to terms with something on that very day. And because she came to pick me up from the bus station. And before we even got to the house, she had to explain what happened literally overnight. And was I still comfortable providing some support? Sometimes projects they're different to what you expect, but you learn so much more.
They're testing, aren't they? Yeah.
Very testing. And you find deep within you skills, resourcefulness that you didn't know you had. Like, I've learned a lot about myself and how far I can go. I've done a lot of traveling. I've raised a child, but I am much stronger than I give myself credit for, and more adaptable as well. I kind of thought I was quite strict on certain things, but no, I'm pretty flexible.
And how do you sort of handle the language barrier, the cultural barrier, and give us examples?
Technology does help a lot with language barriers. Like Google Translate, I can't tell you how many times that saved me. But there are times, for example, in Turkey, because it's been winter and a lot of the public bus service is very minimal over the winter, because the tourists aren't on the south coast, basically. So services are reduced. So I was hitchhiking a lot. And I'd get in a car with somebody who was an elderly guy. I don't like looking at my mobile phone in a car. It makes me feel sick. So in those situations, literally, you're just reduced to hand signals. You can have a 2-hour drive ahead of you with somebody who doesn't speak any English. I don't speak any Turkish. And you're just using sign language. And, you might be commenting on the weather, or every time you see a beautiful sight, you just exaggerate everything. It's like, wow, look at that. And you're just like, oh, my goodness.
You're mentioning hitchhiking. And so is this, how do you look after yourself? And how do you know you're going to be safe? Especially in a country that don't know the language.
Yeah.
It could be anybody.
So I'm an experienced traveler. When you've taken your 7-year-old son single-handedly backpacking around the world, you have picked up so many skills, and your intuition is so finely tuned to situations. It's such a responsibility that your everything is heightened. So as a result, now traveling on my own, I'm fairly confident that I have all this. Okay, things can go wrong, I know that, but I can reduce the chances, I can reduce the risks. Just as an example, so I've been canvassing in Warsaw with a friend. Everyone in our team lives in Britain. We all speak English. I've walked with people in our team, and they will go up a staircase in a flat where it's in one of the most deprived areas in Warsaw without a care in the world. They're not asking for someone to back them up. They're just heading on up the stairs. And that is something I would never do. They're not aware of what could potentially be around the corner. However, I would say that I thought I was pretty good in terms of facing most things. So I've been traveling through earthquakes, tsunamis, fire. I thought I nailed everything that could happen to me. I thought I'd done, except on that first project in Spain. Yeah. I was woken up by my housemate, who was the cook in the restaurant, and she was shouting, "Agua, agua." In the middle of the night, we'd had this horrendous rainstorm, and our entire apartment, downstairs apartment, had flooded. And she had only been woken up from things falling on next to her bed and splashing in the water. Now, I would have slept through that. She came rushing into my room, scaring the life out of me. And I had never, ever considered flooding as a danger. And almost everything got destroyed. I had shoes bobbing around in the water. The water level had risen up to the bottom of my bed by the end of the...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So although I think I'm prepared for most things, that really did catch me out. I know I've learned what I should do in an earthquake situation. I've learned what to do if I'm trapped in the back of a car and I need to get out. I've learned how to roll out of cars, but I'd never, ever considered what to do in a flood.
What did you just run away from the water?
You need to save your key items. So like my passport, my computer, my phone, that I needed to be awake very quickly. What I learned from that was don't keep anything on the floor.
Yes.
Everything got destroyed on the floor because I had no cupboards in the room I was staying in. When I was traveling with my son around the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is the earthquake ring of fire, and you remember we had the Christchurch disaster in New Zealand. Yes. We always had an earthquake bag. So every night I had a bag that had our key essentials in it with water, food, and that was always accessible to both of us. And we always did a kind of an emergency door check. So I would turn off the lights and I'd ask my son to find the door, just in case we were ever in that situation.
Yes.
So I planned for all these different emergencies and I work through them constantly in my head. When I'm traveling, I'm exhausted because you are always alert.
I've done a chat with a family who traveled from Singapore to the UK for the Cricket World Cup, and they drove through 21 countries. And they said the biggest thing that we touched by was people's kindness. So yes, you did have a challenging situation, but I'm sure you've got so many stories to tell where you were so overwhelmed by kindness. Give us examples of that. People are generally kind and helpful.
99.9% of the time, people are amazing. And this was the reason why I was so keen to take my son out of school and travel, because he came home one day and he'd learnt about stranger danger. Be aware of people you don't know. And that's that stranger danger concept. Right. Now, I was horrified. I that's not what I want anyone to teach my son. Most of the people in the world you have never met, and you should not be tarring them with this brush. They are dangerous before you know them. And all of my travels proves this. Countless examples. So I remember being on the train from Newark to New York, and I went to find my money, do a last check, and I realized I hadn't picked it off the table at the hostel. But we were on a train, I get into the habit of, if I've got to pay for a train ticket, I'll just have that money available. So I'd obviously pay for that ticket with the cash in my pocket, but I'd left the other cash behind. And we had the whole day ahead of us in New York, and I had no money. And I was saying to Noah, I always had $10 in an emergency stash, either in my shoe or in my top. I knew we had that. So I said to Noah, I whispered, I said, Noah, I'm really sorry, but I need to prepare you. We're not going to have a lot of money for the day. We can probably find something to eat, but just want you to know that we won't be able to do all the fun things that I said. So we're going to try and do different things. Right. And then this old lady next to us, she said, after a while, just as we were getting off pretty much, she passed me $50 and she said, I have overheard you talking to your son, and I don't want you to have a bad day. Here's $50. Oh, yeah. And it's just things like that, but also just when people have got nothing as well, like in Turkey at the moment, the country's going through huge economic turmoil. People are so willing to sit down with you and share their food, or, just pick you up and take you for the ride, rather than, you trying to walk there or find a taxi or something. Whatever people have got, people are generally willing to share. And that is exactly what I wanted to teach my son. Give people the benefit of the doubt and just approach them as you would like to be approached.
So be careful, but that's not how everybody is. No,
it's not like how most people are. It's not like how most people are not like that. The world is just made up of lovely, brilliant humans, and I am extremely positive about the future.
And I definitely want to cover your travels with Noah. And we haven't talked about that. So when you decided to take him out of school and you traveled as backpackers? Yeah. And how did that whole process go? You obviously were nervous because he was only 7-8 years old.
Yeah.
How was school? And you traveled through, say, Australia, New Zealand, Americas, Japan.
It was nearly 9 months. So I was crying the whole way through customs, like getting onto the airplane. I didn't want to do it. I did want to do it, but I was so scared. I didn't have any friends that did this. Like, nobody even backpacked. Most people just organize a 2-week holiday in a hotel.
Yeah.
And I'd taken him on short trips, but I hadn't taken him out of school for a year. Although his dad and I were separated, his dad still had a very important part to play in his life. And we'd only recently separated, and I was so worried about him losing his relationship with his father. And I also just doubted that I could do this. It was just a huge relief when I landed in the airport, and I was like, I've done it. He's still alive.
But gosh, what a treasure of an experience for a 7-8-year-old.
And you asked about how I planned it. Well, you need a loose plan of where you're going. So you do have to keep changing these dates. So I had the countries in mind, but honestly, we had the first flight and we landed in San Francisco. We had 3 nights accommodation booked, and then the rest of the year was mine. That was all I had in my head. 3 nights accommodation. We had 3 nights in the youth hostel in San Francisco with this beautiful view of the San Francisco Bridge and everything. And then it was a case of, right, well, let's just speak to people. Let's see where we should go. Right. And that's how it unfolds. You just get an idea. You're never short of where to go next. Someone's always saying, oh, you should go there. You should go there. And that's how your itinerary just slowly builds. Yes. And then every day, I'm then in the evening, I'm on to the next place to book accommodation, and on to the next. It's extremely tiring because every day you need to make sure you've got somewhere to sleep. And that was a huge concern with a child. I don't mind sleeping on the floor if I have to. Yeah. But with a child, you want them to have a roof over the head at least. I've slept in forests before when I couldn't find anywhere to sleep, but I'm not doing that with my child. And so that is part and parcel of your daily life, travel life, finding food, finding shelter for that evening, as well as having a good time all the way as well.
How did you find hosts who were willing to put you up? Because there's mention of people you just got to stay.
It still exists. It's called couch surfing. And Yeah, and it's couch surfing, and it's basically families who are interested in different cultures, and they will invite you into their home for free to get to know you and learn about your experiences as a traveler. And you get to, most of the time, they have spare rooms, or they have definitely a sofa bed or something. Occasionally you might end up on the floor, but most of the time they will feed you, take you on trips. And this is, traveling with a child, you were never short of these invitations. Japan was brilliant for that, because Japan's quite a hard culture to penetrate. If you go as a tourist, you just see one side of it. But if you can go to a family, and even just for a couple of nights, your whole experience is so much richer for it. Mm-hmm. Same as in Australia. If you get, to be honest, anywhere, we've used couch surfing a lot, but I would say people don't use it now. It's kind of degenerate. It's not very safe now. Initially, when it launched, there were no problems, but now it's abused, and I wouldn't actually recommend it to anyone.
So there's another interesting thing that I saw on Noah's blog. So best travel experiences. One of the places he says using a toilet in Japan. What's all that about?
Okay, so toilets in Japan have about 35 options. So you can be in there for a while before you work out, like, even the flush, or you might have music, or you might have a screen come up where you can play a game. Yeah, that's what he means. Yeah, I mean, I was just always happy to be able to open the door to get in and out.
And sit on the bot.
Obviously, kids are a lot better with technology, so he'd come out and go, "Oh my goodness, did you get it to blow air on your bum or something?" And I'd be like, "No." I think it probably would have polished your bum if you needed it.
But tell us a bit more about Japanese culture and your experiences there.
It was the most challenging country because, as you say, I had stuck to predominantly English-speaking country. But by the time we got to Japan, well, even by the end of month one, I knew that I could trust Noah. I knew that I would never lose him. When I gave him rules, and he stuck to them. And I knew that if I lost him, he'd be able to find me through the strategies that we'd worked out. So by the time we got to Japan, we were one. Yeah, he read my mind, and I could communicate to him without noise, just through hand signals. If I needed him to do something quickly to get out of danger, he could read me. Like Japan, the language outside of the cities, there was no English. And I remember we had a Japanese person write out an A4 sheet of, "We need somewhere to stay. Can we stay here?" Because we didn't want to go to these faceless tourist hotels, or where the businessmen go. We wanted to go to the little places run by families, but we needed so we had to show this sign. But he also had there was a computer console called a PSP, and it was one of the first. He had a program to translate a voice, so he would speak into it, and it would then turn it into Japanese.
Oh, PSPs would do that.
I never heard anyone else use this, but because he was so competent with technology, he found this out, and we would use that to get around. Oh. We also actually had our money stolen in Japan, which everyone's like, "Oh, Japan's such a safe place." And it was so ironic because we hadn't anticipated it. And I think I dropped my guard. Because everyone's like, "Oh, Japan's so safe. Everyone's so peaceful." You learn these things that you can't ever switch off.
How did you lose your money?
I put it down somewhere, and then when I came back, it had gone. Within that was all my cards. So that reduced us to. Fortunately, we were staying with a family who were able to help me get some emergency money, and then my cards were replaced. But moments like that are just, you just don't know how you're going to carry on.
Talking about ironies, like you said, Japan, one would think, is the safest place. And I mean, I remember reading through your blog where Noah thought there's going to be McDonald's everywhere in the US, and you hadn't found one till you stepped out of the US.
I suppose there was the expectation that most people in Japan would have some English. And they didn't speak English. Yeah, we were thrown actually. And I suppose traveling as British people, there is also the expectation that we have money. It's hard for people to understand that we're on a budget because we're traveling for such a long time. We can't spend £50 on accommodation. We're looking more at £10 for both of us. It's their misconception of tourists.
Yes. But
it was a year-long travel and we couldn't do that.
So how about like stuff like lessons for Noah?
I was really lucky. He's at primary at 4, he could read like an 11-year-old. His head teacher was very happy for us to leave because he didn't quite know what to do with Noah. But I was obviously concerned as a teacher that there would be some elements of the curriculum that he'd be missing out on. So I did take books, but I think I threw them away within like the first 3 weeks. Traveling is it's an education. So I was using him to convert currency. He was manipulating numbers far above his actual age in terms of working out the price of everything. For geography, he would work out distances, and then we'd go on nature trips in Australia and we'd learn about lava tubes that not many children get to see and walk through a lava tube, and then understanding about, especially because we were going around the Ring of Fire, the information about tectonic plates. He's a wizard. He can.
I mean, I remember his striking photograph of inside this model whale heart. Is it? Getting to see the dimensions of how big this creature is. What experience, isn't it?
And like we'd be kayaking on a lake in southern New Zealand, and a dolphin would just like leap over the front of his canoe. We'd be fishing with like just a piece of fishing line and a little hook, and he'd catch a mini shark like this.
Ooh.
And he'd be like, and it's experiences like that you can't find in a classroom.
And which is why the headmaster was perhaps happy for you to go again. Was it in 2 years' time?
Yeah, and he's one of these headmasters who sees the value in actual experiences, where most schools are reducing all of their school trips. He's trying to increase them, because getting out of the classroom and learning, that's real learning. It's quite interesting that my son now he decided not to go to university. Instead, he's doing a degree apprenticeship. So he's doing university and he's in a job.
Because and of course the usual route is go to university.
Yeah. And he needs more. He needs to learn on the job. And that's how he spent a lot of his education. Curiosity for me is what teaches. If you have a child that's asking questions, how does this work? And you can actually take them and show them, get them to experience it. That learning is so much more valuable. Yeah, he's got the sensations, hasn't he, around learning this. Yeah, like when we were in the north of Japan and there was a tornado coming, there was just a massive rush to like get safe, and we needed to get down south. And just feeling that tension on the trains, and everyone on their phone trying to like organize where they were going to sleep, and that you can't teach that.
Yes, they're life experiences.
It's life experiences, yeah, and I'm so pleased that I had the gut,
to do it 2 times and more. You did lots of little trips as well. You must have seen extremes in every way, food wise, accommodation wise, transport wise.
One night you could be sleeping on the floor and a rat might run next to your head. The next night you might have been invited. I remember we were playing we were on a playground in Australia, and this guy came up to us, and it's not something I would usually do, but we got chatting, and he said, why don't you come back to ours? And, we've got a big family house, and it turned out he was the captain of a Navy boat. He was like this, and his house was enormous. Being comfortable in both of those situations, it's a skill you learn. We've been in Japan, where in Japan, people don't have any space. So we would literally go to meet a family, and the room we stood in was that was their house. And they'd make space for us in the corner, and we were 5 of us sleeping in one room. They're so good with their architecture in their rooms. The kitchen will have just come out of this cupboard. There was always a bathroom separate, but you really appreciate how different cultures live. Like space is at a premium in Japan. But in Australia, the land is, they don't even have to build 2 stories, it's just all flat out on the land. So yeah, huge contrasts.
Just the wide variety of nature that you got to experience, because these countries are so nature rich, isn't it? I mean, America or New Zealand, Australia.
Yeah, so one of my son, the memory that he shares the most is when we were on a coach trip to Death Valley in America, and he says, "Mum, do you remember we woke up and we were in Death Valley?" And he just has this image of just nothing and sand dunes all around him. And when you wake up every morning and you're in a new place, it's such an amazing feeling that you've got this, you just have to get up out of your bed, walk out the door, and you are in a new adventure. For me, that just is so rejuvenating. Like, that's how I live my best life. Having that huge opportunity to explore and meet new people, that for me is what living is like. It's a beautiful world, and I need to see as much as I can.
How about encounters with wildlife?
Nothing too amazing. I mean, I remember when we were in Yosemite, and it was winter, and we did see bear tracks on the path we were following, and I hadn't got any bear spray because I honestly hadn't thought we'd be going that far, to see bears. So, but when we saw these big bear prints, we were like, okay, let's maybe go down the hill a bit. We've had scary spiders in places where we've been staying in Australia. In Turkey 2 months ago, I saw quite a few snakes when I was hiking. That's part and parcel, isn't it?
You quote on your website, do one thing every day that scares you. And that's exactly it, isn't it? Do something that's out of your comfort zone. And like you said, comfort zones, they are comfortable, but they are also restricting.
The comfort zone is habit and routine, isn't it? You're comfortable. You're not pushing yourself. After a while, that really bores me. I've never had that connection with a home, really. Like, for me, it's just somewhere where I stay to be able to do my job or to raise a child, because ultimately you don't want them to be moving around the world when they're in their secondary school, because it's too disruptive to their education. And I certainly wasn't able to homeschool my son in secondary education. He was far more intelligent than I am in physics and maths and everything. So it wasn't an option. So I had to make a base for him.
I'm sure we could chat all morning with your experiences. But thank you so much for giving me so much of time. But what's your future project?
So next Monday, I'm off to a small town in Transylvania, Romania, to work with a guy who runs an organic bee association. And he obviously sells his honey, but he does a lot of educational work around bees and protecting bees.
What will you be doing there? So
it depends on the season. So as I understand it, and I haven't had much time to research much of this, but this time of year it's collecting pollen. The pollen from the bees.
Yes.
And that's a bit of a superfood at the moment, I understand.
Yes. I know this because I'm allergic to it.
It was funny because in Spain, actually, I'll just tell you this. In Spain, I have lived thinking that I had an allergy to avocado. But in Spain, I had the opportunity to do some avocado harvesting. So I was like, okay, not sure how this will go, but I'll step out of my comfort zone. Let's try it. Anyway, I'm not allergic to avocados.
Okay. You've discovered something new. You said Transylvania, and I had one little note written. You say on one of the blogs that you were looking at the Sky Scanner and you found the cheapest ticket to go and tell us that story.
Sometimes my travel bug, my wanderlust is so strong, but I was a single parent. I don't have lots of money. Using Sky Scanner to find your next adventure is everyone should try it at least once. So you can just request the cheapest place to travel from any given airport. And sometimes it can be like £25. Yes. So you just book a one-way ticket and you just go and see what happens. the adventure literally unfolds. Okay, you need to have some time off work if you've got a regular job. Just try it. It's like the old idea of getting a pin and pinning it on the world.
Yeah.
But this way, it's good for people with minimal budget. It doesn't matter where you go in the world, you will find adventure and you will find something new.
This was an unpronounceable city name for me, where the cheapest flight that you took to in Transylvania.
Cluj-Napoca. You know what? And from there, I know that there's a train. There's a really good train system through Romania, and you can go from Cluj all the way to Transylvania. You can go and visit Dracula's castle, and then you can carry on. You can go through the Balkans. You can go down into North Macedonia by bus. You can just keep traveling all the way around, and then when you're done, you just get a flight back out again.
Wow. The very, very last question, Sam. What's your advice to people to keep that adventure going? You have given us lots of nuggets. And by the way, audience, Sam also writes a blog where she gives like a little small list of advantages of doing various things, or just various topics. So do feel free to take a look. I'll put a link underneath the description as well. Sorry, Sam, carry on.
Okay, so my advice is, lots of people are planning for something, usually when they're older, and they say, one day I'll go and see the Grand Canyon, or one day I'll go and see the Taj Mahal. But I think what people need to say is, this is day one, I'm going. There's no guarantees in life. For whatever reason, ill health, financial loss, you don't know. Don't live with regrets, make it day one. Just put one step. You just need to take one step, and then another step, and then another step. And you can make that one day a day one.
Fantastic. And then there was this other very recent blog as well that you wrote, and it's very relatable to my sort of generation.
Empty nest syndrome.
That's it. Emptiness syndrome.
Emptiness syndrome affects so many people, so many parents, and especially women, and especially single women that have raised their children on their own. You can imagine your whole life is dedicated to your children, and then suddenly they've gone. And you are so proud that they've gone, but you're left with an empty nest, and that's why it's called empty nest syndrome.
Yeah.
But you have a huge opportunity to turn that into something positive. There is so much you can do when all the time you never had, you now have.
And I absolutely agree with you, because I always say that this is like a really good time frame, because your kids have gone, you have the time, and more than likely you have the money because you've had a career of whatever 20 plus years. And also you're not very young. And so you're still in fairly all right shape of health. And so, make the most of it while, although I haven't quite taken that drastic step that you have.
If your children have just left home, there's not the grandchildren on the horizon soon. There's this huge gap of opportunity, because if they do have children, you're going to want to be around for that part of their life.
Yes.
So this might be your only chance. And like you say, you're healthy. You should have financially, you should be more stable than ever before, because you've not got grandkids to pay for, or so this is really a wonderful time to do something totally different.
And on that note, Sam, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Advice of make this the day one.
Yeah, please make it day one.
All the very best with your next project.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you very much.